Greetings, globe heads and flatards. I've been having a conversation with somebody on my page who's replied to several of my comments and kind of going back and forth. And his last comment contained a whole bunch of questions. And I thought to myself, instead of trying to type out all these long answers to this, it'd be easier to just make this the topic of my next video. So this video is kind of a reply to someone who calls himself Awakened Mind and has taken issue with one of my videos that I posted. And he asked about, actually the first thing he does is make a statement. He says, watch a boat cross the horizon with the naked eye, then take out a pair of binoculars. There it is. Keep watching until it appears to vanish. Then take out a high-powered telly. I think by that he means telescope. I'm guessing he's not American. Not familiar with the term, but I'm guessing he means telescope. Boat comes right back. On a very clear day, you can do this for well over 100 miles. Eventually, the visibility factor and/or the law, let's not debate semantics, of perspective kicks in. Think about this. This is a claim that flat earthers have been making. It is demonstrably false. It is just absolutely 100% a false claim. If you go and search all through YouTube, you're going to find a whole bunch of videos trying to debunk each other, flat earther videos and normal people videos, I call them, showing two totally different things. And I want you to notice the differences between these videos. First of all, the flat earther will show you nothing. You can't see any boat. You're zoomed way out. The camera's like essentially on wide angle. And then they zoom in and there's a little tiny fishing boat. It's almost always the small boat, folks. And you will look for the horizon and you will see every time the horizon is behind that boat. So the claim that the boat went over the horizon and therefore it's gone and I used a zoom or telephoto or telescope or whatever and brought it back, it's just an absolute lie. It's not true. It's zooming out on a small boat that's too far away to see because you're zoomed out, and then you zoom in, you can clearly see the boat has not yet gone over the horizon. On the contrary, if you watch videos debunking this, you will see the videos from the people who believe in the globe reality. You will see these giant tankers, oil tankers and cruise ships and stuff like that, boats that are literally big enough to see when they go over the horizon. And you will see them disappear bottom up and clearly see the horizon in front of the boat, not behind it. And that's the difference. The claim that a boat can go over the horizon and be brought back is just absolute false. Absolute falsehood. And it's done tricking you with video cameras. If you have any question about it, just go to the beach and see for yourself. This claim is not true. Then he asked a question: how come the satellite radio in my car can't get a signal when I'm 200 kilometers from the city in the mountains? This also is a misunderstanding, apparently, of how satellite works. Again, he says kilometers, so I'm guessing this guy is not in the United States. I don't know where he is. But here in the United States, you can drive the 4,000 miles from one side of the country to the other, and you will always get a satellite signal from Sirius XM unless and until you drive under something. Here in Houston, I'm in the most important city in America, let's face it. But no, like the third or fourth largest city. So obviously we're going to get all kinds of signals. But you can't get the Sirius satellite signal when you're under an underpass or when you're in a parking garage. Because the satellites are, guess where? They're up in the sky, up there. So, but I can drive into the middle of nowhere in the Arizona desert, in the New Mexico desert, in Nevada, and I can always get a signal. The only way in the wilderness I won't be able to get a signal is if I'm under a canopy of trees. And that can block the signal because it's a very faint signal from way up in the sky. And that's how line of sight works. In the military, I was actually a communications sergeant, and we had both satellite phones and regular cell phones. We were ordered to use the cell phones first because they were cheaper for the military, and when we got outside of range where no cell phone tower could be reached, it was then that we used the satellite phones. So this claim that satellite phones use cell towers or whatever, it's crap. His next question is, how come I was told about the Coriolis effect when it's verifiably bowl and then a word that rhymes with spit? That's kind of language I don't use on my page. Actually, I don't know. I think the Coriolis effect has been a little bit overblown. It is something real. It's proven by the Foucault pendulum. It's proven by the way that hurricanes or typhoons spin one way north of the equator, one way south of the equator. As to its effects on bullets and all that, I'd have to talk to a sniper. I just don't know. When you're pouring something into a container and draining it out the bottom, there are other things that can affect the spin, like the direction you poured it in and stuff. So yeah, some of those claims I can be a little bit suspect. I agree. How come the average temperature is so different in the North Pole than it is in the South Pole, and how come there's no vegetation at the South Pole if it's a ball and the sun is 93 million miles away? This demonstrates to me that this guy, Awakened Mind, is really just parroting what he's heard from other flat earthers that have done more research than him, because his terminology here I don't think is even what he intended, or the terminology that he's trying to parrot. How come the average temperature is so different at the North Pole and the South Pole, and how come there's no vegetation at the South Pole? There's no vegetation at the North Pole. There's no vegetation at either pole. So I think he might have meant no vegetation inside the Antarctic Circle. There is vegetation inside the Arctic Circle, more so than in the Antarctic Circle. It is colder at the Antarctic than the Arctic, and there's a reason for that. Huge temperature differences are found anywhere on Earth at any latitude when you're talking about inland versus water. Water absorbs and releases heat at a different rate than land does. That's just a known fact, and it causes different weather patterns than you have on land. In the Korean Peninsula, you have the north winds that come right down out of Siberia, and the weather in Korea is a lot more drastic than San Francisco, California, which is a lot milder and about the same latitude. But San Francisco primarily gets its weather patterns right off the Pacific, and that makes it milder. The North Pole is a giant ocean called the Arctic Ocean that is covered with ice, and the South Pole is a giant continent called the continent of Antarctica that's covered with ice, and continents are different than oceans. That's just a fact. Also, on the Earth itself, most of the land mass is in the northern hemisphere, so the southern hemisphere is almost all water, and that causes differences in climate as well. At what height am I going to see the Earth spin below me, as I surely can't see this happen from a balloon? Well, that's kind of a stupid question. Go find a clock on the wall. Not one of those digital clocks, the regular analog clock, and look at the hour hand. In case you're not sure, that's Mickey's little hand. Now, when are you going to see Mickey's little hand spin? Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe that's a bad analogy, because that hour hand actually spins twice as fast as the Earth. Twice as fast. And you can't even see it moving, okay? If you're out in space, the Earth is so massive, you're not going to see it spinning. If you were sitting there watching the globe and you could pinpoint where California was and then wait until it moved to where Washington, D.C. was, you'd have to wait 4 hours for it to go 4,000 miles. You're not going to be able to sit there and watch the Earth spin from a distance because it's so massive and it's spinning. You're confusing lateral speed with rotational speed. It is spinning half the speed of your hour hand on your clock. And sure, the linear speed is 1,000 miles an hour at the equator. But think about your balloon. Your balloon is sitting on the Earth. It is part of the Earth system, so to speak. And it too is traveling west to east at 1,000 miles an hour. Now you launch your balloon up into the air. Tell me, please, what force is going to come along and instantly stop that balloon so that you can sit and watch the Earth spin under it? That's the law of motion, dude. Things at rest remain at rest till acted upon by some force, and things in motion tend to stay in motion till acted upon by some force. So you've got all this stuff on the Earth that's part of the Earth system that's moving along at 1,000 miles an hour. The air, the balloon, the Earth, everything. You take that balloon, you go up into the air, and there are some winds, mostly caused by weather pattern, but caused by heat dynamics and stuff like that. But for the most part, the air, the balloon, the Earth are all moving at 1,000 miles an hour. The balloon goes up; they're still all moving at 1,000 miles an hour. How are you going to see that move in relation to the balloon? The expectation that you would see it does nothing but show your ignorance. And I'm not just picking on you, awakened mind, all flat earthers. This demonstrates your ignorance, okay? This is the law of motion. If you would expect to see, as soon as you lift off the ground, the Earth just starts spinning under you, that's ignorance, okay? How come we have not shown the pear-shaped Earth in the NASA's photo directory? Again, absolute ignorance and taking someone out of context. If you looked at the Earth from space, it would look perfectly spherical, and nobody has ever claimed otherwise. What Neil deGrasse Tyson was talking about is, in reality, he used an analogy of a pear because the Earth is thicker at some point than others. If you were to take it from space and start measuring a picture, you might get a pixel difference. In reality, it's, I don't know what the exact dimensions are, but it is thicker at the equator because it's spinning. It is thicker in the southern hemisphere than the northern hemisphere because water is more affected by that than land, but it is not. It is something that is measurable, not something that you're ever going to detect with your eye. And anybody who's expected that you would detect it with your eye, they're just completely taking Neil deGrasse Tyson out of context and really being disingenuous about that. Gyroscopes, they are called the artificial horizon for a reason. Ask a pilot about the computerized system that dips the nose of an airliner. This dips the nose thing is utter nonsense. The airliner is flying at an altitude above sea level. That altitude curves because sea level curves. It is called sea level. It is not called sea flat, you morons. It's sea level, okay? And a sphere is level all the way around its circumference. The only way for you to stay level is to follow the Earth's curve. And this happens naturally. It happens without dipping your nose. At every point along that curve, you are level, meaning parallel with the surface of the Earth, or perpendicular to the direction of the pull of gravity. This is one of the more ridiculous and stupid claims that flat earthers show their ignorance with. The direction, there is no universal down. Down is toward the center of the Earth, direction of gravity, and as long as you're flying level, perpendicular to that, you're just naturally going to go around the curve. Does traveling eastward versus westward result in a substantial time difference? Same thing. Law of motion, I just told you this. You're spinning 1,000 miles an hour. Your plane is spinning 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, right along with the Earth. When you take off and you accelerate to 500 miles an hour, that's 500 miles relative to the surface of the Earth. That 1,000 miles an hour that you had is not lost, okay? Think about it this way. If you're on the Earth at the equator, sitting on the runway facing east, your plane is going forward 1,000 miles an hour. Now that plane takes off and accelerates to 500 miles an hour going eastward. That plane in reality, relative to the center of the Earth, is going 1,500 miles an hour, but relative to land is only going 500 miles an hour. If he turns around and starts flying west, his engines are accelerating him relative to the surface of the Earth, but really you could think of it as decelerating, because now he slows down to 500 miles an hour. Anyway, if you don't get the laws of physics and the laws of motion, I don't know how you'll ever understand this stuff. But to think that suddenly when the plane takes off, all of its movement that it had as part of the Earth is suddenly stopped, you would actually need some force to act on it to take that speed from it. And then he says, the globe Earth model is utter nonsense. The Big Bang Theory is absurd. And this is another absurd tactic of flat earthers, is that they can never stay on topic. He starts out here talking about the shape of the Earth, and his very last sentence is the Big Bang Theory is absurd, which is a completely different topic for a completely different day and has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the shape of the Earth. So anyway, I don't think that I am going to change the mind of a sleep mind or whatever, awakened mind. I think this guy, probably like all other flat earthers, is very closed-minded. You have to close your mind to an awful lot of evidence to glob onto this ridiculous theory. But I will leave you with this. This morning here in Houston, the sun rose at an azimuth of 113 degrees. That is a full 23 degrees south of due east. And if you're a flat earther and you don't understand why that's a problem, you need to research your own model. And if you don't have a model, that's a problem. Because you can't replace a model with nothing. You've got to bring your own model. And every idea I've seen of how the sun goes around the flat earth, it is impossible that the sun rose south of due east this morning. But here in Houston, Texas, that's exactly what happened. So pull out your little azimuthal projection, whatever it's called, your little Gleason map, and find where the sun is circling around, and you try and figure out and explain to me how it was that here in Houston, Texas, the sun rose a full 23 degrees south of due east this morning. Don't fall for the flat earth nonsense, folks. And there's a lot of fun to be had out there on the internet, but don't fall for the snake oil salesman out there.